Hi, hello, uh, my fellow sensitive people. So I just finished doing my remote, and I wanted to just come in and talk about the meditation that I had. I was trying to just allow myself to explore, where my mind would go during the meditation. And I found myself meditating on the concept of oasis, of creating peace zones throughout the world. And an oasis is a place where people come together and they agree to peace. They agree not to fight, whether they agree with one another or not about who they vote for or who they don't vote for. The underlining purpose of Oasis is that everybody treats everyone else with kindness and that they share the resources. And central to the concept of the oasis is fresh water and protecting the water. And we think about the Middle East, we think of it as a violent place with a history of wars and violence, particularly when we read the Torah. And this is the time when we think about the Torah a lot because we are in the high holidays, and we've just finished the New Year's, which is coming into New Year's, the time of the harvest. And then we'll go into Yom Kippur, which is the fasting and repentance, the days of awe. So it's a time to really think about how we can all be better people and how we can improve our character, particularly during scary times. And while I was meditating on that, I kept going back to this idea of oasis and building oasis zones. And I had written a paper about building oasis zones in Israel. I really believed that Israel, and Gaza, we could do something really amazing there. We could give people a choice. Those people who want peace can live in oasis, and those people who don't want peace don't have to live in oasis. And as I began to play with this concept, I found myself drawing a map, and that map had 6 oasis zones. And the map was broken into zones based on geomapping. And I sent it to the IDF. I believe at that point it was given to Elon Musk. I also sent it to Elon Musk and everyone else on the planet. Zuckerberg, Bezos, anybody who had money that was willing to invest in this concept of safe zones. MBS of Saudi Arabia, LCC of Egypt. And I had hoped that we could get everybody to safety and separate them out from Hamas, which is very difficult to do, and that they could have a safe haven somewhere in Gaza. And when those people agree to nonviolence, we could maybe get LCC to open up and rent some space for those civilians, for those people in North Sinai, because Gaza is going to be demolished, because they've got tunnels 60 meters under the ground with bombs and, in some cases, possible chemicals, chemical warheads, etc., chemicals that were going to be used in war. So it's unlikely that anybody can go back to central Gaza until this clearing, for their own safety, if nothing else. And so I was hoping that that first oasis zone would be in North Sinai, Gaza, or Rafah, excuse me. And then after that, my next dream was to see Zone 2 security point. And the reason that that area was important to me was because this is where the aquifer is. And if you're building oasis zones, you've got to think in terms of your water supply. The other thing I imagined is a subway system that I called the Max Line. Middle Eastern alliance in conjunction with X if Elon wanted to participate in being part of the transportation system. But it would take you from zone to zone, you know. So if the majority of workers were in zone 1, they could travel on their own subway system to the various different zones. And what was great about these zones is that they share these zones with a neighboring country in a spirit of peace and nonviolence. So the North Sinai zone would share a border with Egypt, offering jobs to the Egyptian people. So a certain percentage of the people living there would be Egyptian, and a certain percentage would be Gazan. And then over on the Israeli side, we have the same concept. The Gazans would move out further into these areas which had been cut off from them as no man's land for security reasons could now be used for crops and nature and good things. And it could also open up space to Israelis who have technology that they could offer and teach, sharing in these Oasis zones. Zone 3 would be for the new families in the zone, schools. It would be family focused. That's near the near the near and the near kibbutz is where that attack happened. Is where the 3 would go. 4 was Sderot, and that would be the main transportation hub. Zone 5 would be college, university, and zone 6 would be the tourism zone. So it created a lot of space that currently doesn't exist, and the concept was unity, to bring unity and integration. Which brings me back to tonight's meditation. And tonight's meditation is about this idea of how can we come together to create oasis zones. Not just the oasis zones in Gaza, that I believe we can do this. I believe we can find people in Gaza that are willing to be part of the Abraham Accords, that are willing to be part of the Oasis, because the Middle East is not just a history of bloodshed, it's a history also of peace and tolerance, and some of the first democracies. If you look at the structure of many of the Oasis zones, what we're learning now about how people maintained Oasis zones dedicated to protecting the environment. So one way we can do this is more peaceful coexistence and creating intentional communities that are inclusive. We don't want to turn them into places that are militant. You know, you have militants that are creating enclaves to protect themselves and the white race, right? So in their minds, they're creating an oasis zone. When we think about intentional communities, we're doing it not to separate ourselves from the world, but to just make a distinction between our values and our beliefs and how they're aligned. In ancient times, when a person was not cooperating, was not sharing, was selfish, they would be placed in exile. And so that's pretty much what I envision will happen in Gaza. And I believe what's going to happen all over the world is that it doesn't matter how rich you are. The world is turning its back on cruel behavior, and we need to move back to the Oasis model, which is agreeing to disagree and working the land and protecting the land for future generations. And if someone has to go into exile for the good of the community, that is how it was handled. They were exiled. So if we feel that our leaders, and that includes the people that own the corporations, do we know their names? Do we have to exile them from Oasis? And what would that look like? Does it mean that we stop buying their products? Do we publicly talk about exile? Because the worst pain in the world for most human beings is to be in exile. All right, I'm going to go ahead. We're going to do the card reading about what's going on in the world. I know a lot of people are anxious to see the cards. I did want to talk about this concept of Oasis because it was tonight's meditation. And let's do the empath's prayer. Okay. That looks rather good, doesn't it? Yes. I want to call on white light protection for myself and this community as we ask permission from Spirit to access the Akashic records. We call on our spirit guides and our good angels to be with us. Please give us the clarity and the wisdom that is needed to empower all of us on our journeys to make the best decisions for ourselves, our families, the planet, the people we love, but also to help those that we may have strife with. And together, collectively, as a community, we say, Amen. Let's go in. Happy New Year's if you happen to have celebrated Rosh Hashanah. This is the time when we think about account and reckoning, looking at our actions, looking at what we can do to improve our character every year. Round and round it goes, thinking about these things. It's an important thing to think about. How can we be more inclusive? How can we encourage unity, loyalty to the state? How do you get people to be loyal to the state? By having a vested interest in the state. If they have a vested interest in the state, if they're getting paid, if they're seeing a direct benefit, but when they no longer see a benefit, that's the point at which people stop supporting the state. There's death and transformation over us at this time. We can see the base of the matter is death. We have death and transformation at this time, and the Fool begins in the new reincarnation. So we have death and reincarnation here. We have death and a new beginning. Where we are at right now, I've got them upside down, excuse me. Three of Wands. In the next 3 months, there will be major changes that will begin to happen. There will be major changes. Crossing card is there will be major changes, but everything will be all right. For many years to come, there's good coming into the world. We are sitting in actually a very positive place for the most part. Nine of Cups is good fortune. It's actually a positive element, and we're coming out of Devil and into a state of confusion. But overall, this is speaking out about an optimistic time in our future, because we do have this breaking the chains of addiction or codependency sits in the back, and instead we're heading towards confusion. At the same time, we can have anything that we want. Be careful of emotionalism. Emotion can be a great gift. It can help us come up with wonderful ideas about how we're going to help ourselves and other people. But got an extra card there. Oh, no, I don't. But it can also be dangerous. The opposition is an inverted Queen of Cups that can be emotionalism. If we're looking at the current political state, I just feel like there's so much gaslighting and so much lying to the American people that the only way that we're going to come out of this is if we see the insanity. you have this like addiction here. It's like a cult. And then you have this total gaslighting. Seven of Cups is to be in the clouds. It's to be completely delusional almost about what's going on in the world. And we can have everything we want. We have to go back to what our ethics and our values are and holding ourselves accountable. Be careful about emotional instability. Be careful, the ability to walk away and head towards something else. We have to have a vision. You know, if you look at the kibbutz, the early concept of the kibbutz, the idea was to create an oasis, and it was very successful. You know, if you look at the kibbutz overall, it was a successful idea. You know, it really was. Oops, I want to make sure I get to everything there. In the sense that they were working to creating a nirvana. They were working to create heaven on earth. And it, you know, it certainly had problems. Everybody was having a love affair with everybody else, and nobody could agree on anything. And but they also did amazing things on the kibbutz. It was a social experiment that in many ways was successful, you know. In some ways, you know, they privatized them, and I think we lost a lot of the magic of the kibbutz, which is a shame. It would be wonderful if we could come back to that again. But we have here it's slowly moving in a way that I actually kind of like. It's because it's not tightened. So we have this idea of a peaceful countenance, which is the King of Cups coming in. Oops, there goes my candle. Coming into our power. Don't be willing to let go of the past. Be willing to let go of the past, because, you know, the past is good. We learn lessons from the past. I know people that love to sit and study the Torah, and they study the Talmud all day long, right? I know people like this. But the problem with that is that there's a lot of things we know now. We're older and wiser. We wouldn't follow the Talmud because, you know, it's from the Bronze Age, right? It's, you know, it's like it starts during the Bronze and the Iron, you know, like. So be willing. Keeps doing that. Oh well. Be willing to go boldly towards the future, as they say, in the sense of don't be so afraid of the future. Don't be so afraid of what the future holds. Don't be so afraid of science. You know, we're entering into the time of the power, which is the magician, and also the high priestess, the balancing of the male and the feminine. People want to know, do I think that Donald Trump is, you know, on his way out? Yeah, I do, because his cards are terrible. You know, he never he doesn't do well in the cards. His health becomes a major challenge.
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
Sorry, gotta turn that down. Oh well, my computer is doing its own thing. The point is that it doesn't matter. What matters is that we build Oasis. That is what matters. That's what matters ultimately. So if we're talking about how do we handle the fact that there are crazy people out there that are taking our country hostage, the response is exile. And this is basically what the meditation says, is that we are to pull back from the people in the big money, begin instead to put our attention towards creating uh, communities, intentional communities, move towards taking care of the environment, and check out. And we lead, they follow. And the solution is oasis zones, whether there are oasis zones here or if the Abraham Accords decides to build them in Gaza, Israel, Jordan, Israel. The idea is that they share a border. That's the concept of an oasis zone, so that people can come together and create bridges of peace and safety. That's the idea of an oasis zone. And anybody on any side, same would be true for, Israeli society, right? If you are, I can say this because I'm an Israeli, if you are anti the state, if you're sitting in a yeshiva somewhere learning how to be anti the state, you don't want to serve, you just want to take money from the state, but you hate the state, you want to destroy the state, that's somebody who is a threat to the state, or what they would call a parasite of the state, right? And the same is true for somebody that wants to destroy the state of Israel by making it, an evangelical Christian country or an evangelical ultra-Orthodox country at the expense of the other 90-something% of Jewish people that don't want to have anything to do with that, right? So, or somebody who's a terrorist. The point is that exile is about sending people out that don't want to play nice with everybody else. And what you can see in these cards is we're coming out of this addiction and the threat and the danger of religious extremism on both sides is that it creates these cults, these myopic worlds, and then you become chained, almost addicted to them. And now is the time of the magician, which is that we have to stop being followers and we have to be leaders. And are we going to be continually at the mercy of an abusive person, or are we going to become independent? And I think it's really good what happened with Jimmy Kimmel and the fact that Disney got in trouble, etc. I'm glad that there was backlash, because ultimately it reminds us that the power lies with the people and not with the politicians and not with the big money. They aren't going to have any money if you don't buy Teslas, right? If you aren't buying what they're selling, then they no longer have any money. Or if they bankrupt the dollar and nobody has any money because you've eliminated the job, so nobody can buy the Tesla robot with what money, right? So we have a lot more power than we realize. That is the message. But the message is also, don't give up on the oasis. Build communities of intention, even if it's just inside your own building. What can you do? You don't have to agree with them about Trump. You have to agree on whether or not the collective community, you're going to clean up each other's trash, take care of each other's kids, be decent people, and, be trustworthy, be the kind of a neighbor that you would want to have living next to you, right? Start from the basics. You don't have to be a messiah, we just have to be decent people, right? Anything more is great, but start with just being a decent person. Start with the oasis. And that is what I believe the future holds for all of us, is I believe that we are moving towards oasis. And that is a choice. Again, the history of the Middle East hasn't just been about war. It's been about the Bedouin. It's been about hospitality and kindness and graciousness and sharing. It's been about the oasis and about peace and tolerance. And I believe that we will either go back to that or we will face our own demise. All right. Thank you so much for watching tonight's remote. If you're trying to get in for a reading with me, you can find all that information below. Be kind to all so that all will be kind to you too. God bless. Peace out. We'll see you next time. Thanks, everyone.